got to the church, what happened then?
Got to the church, and some people were milling around on the outside. People were everywhere. Police officers were outside, and most of us went on inside the church. My brother and some friends were hanging out outside, and he told me that a police officer said, "You better go into church. I'm going to take you to jail." So they ran into church, and Bevel and Andrew Young were in the church, and they were saying, "You're in this church, you're going to sing and pray, and we're going to jail." So you really didn't have a choice if you were down there. So we came out of the church in pairs singing, "We Shall Overcome." I didn't know what the strategy was. I learned later that we were coming out in waves of 50.
Right.
We got about a half block away from the church when we were stopped.
You were marching towards
City Hall.
Towards City Hall.
And the police officer who stopped us had a megaphone. He had a billy club in his hand. And he said we were in violation of a city ordinance. We could not parade without a permit. If we stayed in that line, we were going to jail. That was pretty intimidating for me. He had a gun on his hip. He had a stick in his hand. He was an adult, and he told me to get out of the line. So I had to weigh some things there. But somebody who was further back than I started singing, "We Are Not Afraid." That gave me enough courage to remain in that line, get in that paddy wagon, and go to jail.
And then how long were you in jail for?
I was in jail for 4 days.
4 days.
Mm-hmm. That's when things got a little intimidating again. Of course, they collected our personal belongings at the door, fingerprinted us, gave us mug shots, sent us up to the top floor. And there were lots of folk in there. County jail was concrete floor. It was cold in there. We were in an area that had several individual cells that were not locked, but the door at the end of the corridor was locked. There was a commode in there without any petitions around it. There were double-deck beds in there without any mattresses on them. And we sat around on the floor and on each other, and that went on for that first night. And that was not good. The second day, May 3rd, more children came out and were arrested. And we could see all of this activity taking place out in the park.
That's when the dogs and the hoses came out.
Absolutely. I was already in jail, but my brother and some of his friends described what it was like for them. At first, the firemen came with the hoses. Well, it was warm, and they turned the hoses on, so the kids were acting like they were taking a shower. It was fun. And then an order came to turn the water on full force. And it got kind of nasty then because people were being pushed against the buildings. One girl reported that some of her hair was seared off her head, bruises and scrapes on people's bodies being pushed down the sidewalk with the force of the water. And over in the park, there were dogs, German Shepherd dogs, and they were biting people. Folk had to go to the hospital to get stitches.
Did you understand the implications of what was going on at that moment?
Not totally, no. I knew I had been mistreated, and I thought taken apart would change some things, but I did not know the far-reaching effects. In fact, I really didn't get the full impact of how important this would be until September 15th.
The bombing of 16th.
The bombing of 16th Street Church really brought it home.
What do you think people should remember about the civil rights movement in Birmingham?
I think a lot of things. One, that your voice may be small, but it can be heard. That you need to stand up for what you believe in and what's right. I think people need to remember what it took to get to where we are. These kinds of advances were made on the backs of some people who died, some people who went to jail, and if they don't know that, they can't appreciate where they are today.
Why were young people involved in the marches and not necessarily the parents?
Well, we didn't have a lot to lose. it was pointed out with all of those examples that we were getting a second-class education anyway. And our parents, had they been involved, would have lost their jobs. There wouldn't have been any money coming in to take care of the family's needs. So they really couldn't get involved.
Do you think the leadership understood the implications of what would happen if the march wasn't successful?
Absolutely. I am sure, looking back, that there was a lot of nervousness among the leadership. They perhaps saw danger in our participation. Of course, we were naive and didn't realize that anything could really happen to us. But I'm sure they had to deal with what ifs. I'm grateful nothing really happened.
Well, Janice, I want to thank you for the interview. It was wonderful to see you again.
Thank
you. We will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together. When all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are